had really interesting clinical innovations. We started off with 3 postgraduate medical education programs. One that is in Nairobi and one in Dar es Salaam, because our college spans both Kenya and Tanzania. But we have quickly expanded to 9 postgraduate medical education programs in Nairobi and 5 currently in Dar es Salaam and still growing. So in addition to that, we have expanded into clinical fellowship programs. These are programs that allow medical specialists to super specialize. And we started off with 1 fellowship program in 2016, and we have quickly grown to 15 clinical fellowships. One of our proudest milestones was the launch of our undergraduate medical education program, the MBCHB program that we launched last year. And we have this year admitted our 2nd cohort, marking another step forward to shaping the future of healthcare service, education, and research in this region. So we are transforming medical education and the service by growing a number of specialists and ensuring access to quality and specialized care. So through our free continuous medical education program that is led by our experts, we empower healthcare workers in government and private sector, hospitals in this region. And so far we have trained in these continuous medical education programs more than 10,000 specialists, a remarkable feat. We're driving excellence in medical care in this region. What about research? Our research output has grown tremendously. We have published more than 22,000 peer-reviewed publications that have continued to impact policy and practice in this region and globally. Our faculty members have secured to date more than $15 million of research funding, research which is very competitive in the global scene. We are driving localized studies that shape meaningful regional specific healthcare interventions. So that is a brief about the journey that the medical college has undertaken. Coming to our program on live conversations, what is it really? I know many of the people in the audience have attended previous sessions, but our live conversations program is typically an adaptation of public lecture model of public engagement by academia and other experts, where they discuss their work or other topical issues with lay audiences. But in AKU, what we've done is we've actually flipped that model because we came to a realization that people with lived experiences are also experts in their own right. And we needed to hear their voices in these conversations that are shaping dialogue in our society. So we have, since the inception of this program of live conversations, which are quarterly, we've held 7 of them. This is the 8th one, which is coinciding with our 20th anniversary celebrations. So today's topic is very timely, given what we're observing, a really increase in the rise of activism, advocacy by our Gen Z segment of the population. And we actually need to interact and ask the question of how can we give a voice to these different generations that have very differing opinions, outlooks in life on various aspects of life, such as politics, religion, society, culture, fashion, and all the others. Yeah, that's the question. Do we really need to reconcile these voices, or should we see them as a strength? I'm not an expert in that area. We have the experts seated here with us, and they will be helping us to address that question. I'm sure at the end of the day, we will not only try to address some of the issues that we have, we encounter on a day-to-day basis, but they will open our minds to other questions on that topic that we need to keep exploring to keep the conversation going. So I just want to welcome you all, enjoy, and wish you tremendous learning. Just want to hand this over back to Eric. Thank you.
Thank you very much, my Conflict Prof. All right, let's get right into it. Before I get right to it, I want to introduce my panel. I'll start with my immediate here on the left. She's Mumbi Kahindo, Chief People Officer at Absa Bank. Makofi tafadhali kwake. Zaha Lucy, a woman human rights defender. Makofi tafadhali. Charles Muga, Change Catalyst. You know him popularly from his daily program at Spice. Makofi tafadhali. Eunice, Tole, Director, Quality Assurance and Accreditation at the Accra University Medical College, East Africa. And last but not least, Mbũrũ, Maina, student here at AKU. Good evening once again, all of you. Karibuni sana. As you've heard, this is not about the panel, it's about you, and it's about your thoughts and about your opinions. So I hope that as the conversation grows, I'll be able to lean on to you to give me your thoughts and opinions about these questions of generations. But first, allow me to ask Zaha Lucy to give you 1 minute of why we need to do a 1 minute silence. Zaha.
Good evening, everyone. Good evening.
Yeah.
Thank you. My name is Zaha. I serve at the End Femicide KE movement. And with the current situation that we're having in the country, whereby in the last 90 days, 97 women have been murdered, and the rising cases of femicide across Kenya, I am thankful to Aga Khan that we are going to have a moment of silence, specifically to reflect on the femicide crisis. But importantly, I'd want you to think about the very many victims we have lost and what our accountability spectrum is. What is our job? But equally, to look at them as heroines because they have lost their life on their way. And equally to give strength back to young women and women overall in all their diversity, that we are at risk, yes, and we have to live in fear, yes, but we are still the epitome of change and we are still the epitome of life. So we're going to have a moment of silence in remembrance of all the victims of femicide that we have had in these years and so many years beyond. We shall start now. May their souls rest in peace as we keep marching against the war on femicide. We look forward to a country that does not look at women as subhuman, but as equal human beings that deserve life. Take care of yourself and take care of each other. Thank you.
All right. Great. Shall we start then? All right. Have you heard the phrase that Gen Zs are troublesome? They just can't settle. Have you heard? Show of hand. Have you heard this? Have you also heard that the Gen Xers or millennials, just a bit, the older millennials, the boomers and the rest are super boring, super conservative. They just don't want to change things. They want things to be the way they are. Have we heard that? Is it anywhere true? Okay, we'll find out, all right? So this is where I want us to start this conversation this evening on this perception that these other people who do certain things, and we saw it in June, I think the better part of May and June, where the Gen Zs, the protest led by the Gen Zs. I'm sure I'll be corrected at some point. It's Gen Zote, but it was led by the Gen Z. This is a point of conflict. So let's start from here. And let me start with the person who deals with the people, right? The people manager herself, all right, at the Absa Bank. Let me start with you, Mumbi. When you look at everyone in your workforce, you've dealt with, boomers, you're dealing now with Gen Zs. hopefully alphas, are coming soon. What is this one key distinct thing that you would say is different between all these generations?
Thank you. I think the one thing that you will find that is the uniqueness in how people have been raised within their cultures. I think that's one of the things you realize. So the way your parents present the world to you is what really affects you. So when you look at how my parents presented the world to me as a Gen Xer, is then how I show up. How we have presented the world to our children, because I have Gen Zs as children, is how they are showing up. So in every of the generations, and I think it's the same when you think about the way the boomers raised us as the Gen Xers, then you notice that when you show up at the workplace, you view the world from that perspective. So it's more the nurturing of and where they are at, because the first person who shows them what the world is the parent or a guardian. So you don't wake up one morning and say, I'm a Gen Xer and therefore I'm very conservative, or I really am skeptical about authority. No, it's because something was said to me as I grew up that gave me that perspective of the world. And I then show up in a workplace from that perspective. And in some cases, my school either accentuated that or actually told me that that's what it is, and I need to be aware of it and probably avoid it. So I think that's the one thing that you have to recognize as in a corporate or in a workplace, that people are nurtured differently, in the world that they are nurtured into gives them a view of the world that is then presented. Yeah.
Can I push you back a little bit on this question of parents? Because there's almost a question here about respect. And there's also this question that when certain generations speak back, all right, it's viewed as disrespect, all right? Could you just talk a little on that?
So if you ask me to talk about that, I talk about not necessarily as, I talk about myself.
And your generation.
And my generation, and how we were parented and how we have parented. Yeah, because when I was raised, and I look at whoever is a Gen Xer here, you never spoke back to authority. You didn't.
But why?
No, because that's, my parents were never in a position where they could speak to their parents back. They were not. They were told and they did. Yeah, and they had that cultural upbringing of, this is what you're supposed to do as a child in the house. So that's the way I was raised. Because I did not like certain aspects of that, when I started raising my children, I allowed a bit of latitude to them. So I was willing to have a conversation with my son around whether he could go to school on a Saturday, or whether he really needed to do that activity, or whether we could ask the teacher, can we take a break because we need to go for a holiday and we can, that's what we have allowed them. So we've given them a bit more space where they could push back. So when you say parenting, there are certain things that we've allowed, and what has happened is because we allowed them, our children then have pushed the boundaries, because every generation will push that additional boundary.
Okay, let me stop you there.
Yes.
Because Zaha is completely behind. No. She's besides herself. Zaha, why is the generation pushing back? Why are you just not willing to follow authority? This is what you're told to do, and just do it.
That's exactly the problem. We're not choosing to follow authority. Authoritarianism has never worked to produce formidable humans in the first place. It has produced terrorists and narcissistic human beings. The whole idea that we have is that you are allowed to give me your perspective, and you're allowed as a parent to show me guidance, but in remembrance of the fact that that is ultimately your experience. And so the type of change that we bring as young people is that we look at life as an obscure space for me to choose to do good with or without your advice. So I am not constantly looking at the first person that I want to insult, not really. And I think that's why there's a lot of brotherhood and sisterhood amongst Gen Z. Because when I'm looking at you, I'm not looking at the one thing that I'll do worst to you. I'm looking at you from the perspective of good virtues that I'd want to receive within myself. And I think that's why authority never really mattered to us. I think you can see what we thoroughly did to Ruto. It's a matter of, I want you to understand that I do not have to remind you of where your line of authority begins and ends, that I know of mine.
Right.
And that for as long as it exists to grow a good person in me, for me to do good in others, then it should be upon you. And it's an accountability spectrum to you as a person to do better for others. I don't need to come and remind you. So when it comes to parenthood, which I think has been a very big crisis, because parents will be like, you don't listen. When you tell me to go do medicine, and I know predominantly well all my biology classes, I slept. And I'm saving your money by telling you that I do not want to do the medical course. If you insist, then it's actually upon me to go and fail those exams thoroughly to remind you that I did involve in this discussion. So the whole idea should be, when you're parenting, I'll speak for a Gen Z, right? When you're parenting a Gen Z, if there's one thing that would really work to assist your parent, and I'm not speaking as a parent, by the way, but as a deputy parent, because I'm a firstborn daughter. When I look at how I keep telling my mom, you can say the same information without shouting. Or I tell my dad, you can say the same thing without bolstering in the entire house. The form of communication that has been transcendent between the former generations was violent, because we're looking at a colonial systemic way of speaking. So we're not looking at a space where you were put for you to give feedback. No, you were given things to do. And so when we put a moral accord to communication, we have lost so many generations out of the fact that you think feedback is disrespect. And I can use my words so correctly and put you in your place without mentioning any insult, but it will trigger you because you have not been put in spaces where your opinion mattered before. But now you're coming to a Gen Z space where even if you say, by the way, but like, even if you say, I drink alcohol, it will not be the first place you'll be condemned. No, you'll be asked why. What do you drink? What time do you drink? So even when you're trying to dissociate from the bad behavior, it's from a point of a lot of love, because those are the type of wordings we use upon ourselves. But a good example of the chamas our mothers go to, because the first discussion, of course, is a summary of what your husband did the entire week. You're not giving feedback, right? No one will tell you, okay, I'm so sorry you had to go through that. No, it starts from, ata wewe endo ufanye hivi. From us in our social groups and in our social constructs, we run to ourselves and each other because we look for that hope that already exists, because we were not given the privilege to do so.
Is this just push you back before I go to city? Is this presupposing that this idea of youth is elastic, and then you know best because you have time?
We don't know best. In fact, we know nothing. And the only good thing is that we are very, very eager to learn over and over again without
So
end and
where
limit.
is Gen Z wrong in all this? If
we're wrong to exist with your generation. If we were in Mars, they're here. If we were in Mars and given a chance to start again, we'd put every single foundation of everything we do out of a lot of love.
Right.
Yes.
Okay. Let's go to a boomer. Apparently, you do not need to exist in this universe. You are really interfering with the Gen Zs.
I know she said that in humor. If you take the view that what you call your life experiences is essentially a data collecting process. You start collecting data at a very young age, you just don't know you're collecting data. And that data is sometimes pleasing and sometimes it's unacceptable. Sometimes it's something you don't want to face. Now, that's what happened with those of us who are older. And our children remind us of what we were at a certain point in time, but also they remind us of what we could have been at a certain point in time. And sometimes these are things we have difficulties facing up to them. Now, when you talk about differences, so long as you're on this planet, there will always be differences. You only need to look at the diversity of humanity represented here, how we are similar in so many ways, and yet we're different in so many ways. That diversity is what makes life worth living, and is what makes life interesting. And that is the reason why the vibrancy of life is what it is, because of these differences, and they must exist. As for opinions, you must differ. Because even as you differ, you will agree. If you don't differ, then you cannot grow. If you do not have an opinion that is different, this is a university. This institution wouldn't exist. This institution exists because people are pursuing knowledge, and the pursuit of it means breaking barriers. It means going to frontiers that other people have not dared to go to. And I'm not talking about Star Trek here, okay? I'm actually talking about just everyday life. Now, that's what makes life interesting. As for these differences, they're actually they aren't really differences. A perspective isn't a difference. It's looking at the same thing with different lenses. Many, many people forget that to get where they are, other people had gone there before them, and they laid the ground on which they are now walking, and they have made it possible to do the things that they are now doing. And every generation, including my own, we think we invented many things which we didn't. Every generation comes with the idea that they were the first ones to do it, and the truth is they were not the first ones to do it.
City, could I bring you a bit home? Would you accept the assertion, as the Gen Zs would put it,
Yes.
that the generations before have accepted, tyranny? They did not do anything, and essentially where we are as a country is because of these previous generations' inability to challenge authority.
Challenge has to be defined. When you protest loudly by speaking or by acting out, you are protesting. You can protest by being quiet. There's passive aggression. You don't necessarily need to clobber someone on the head to be aggressive. I can give you a look that can hit you. I can give you a look that can communicate my disgust and my dislike. No. We had a way of expressing respect. Respect meant we kept quiet when older people spoke to us. This generation believe respect is when they talk back at you, and as you speak, they also speak with you. That to them is respect because they feel they're allowing you to understand how they look at life and how they feel about things. To them, that is respect. But if I think traditionally, then I will consider such an action to be the height of disrespect, and yet it isn't actually. Sometimes we fail to do something which life ought to teach you as you get older. The quiet lesson of listening. Because when someone is talking loudly, forget the words. Why must they talk with a high volume? There's something they're trying to tell you. If they're agitated, Zara is telling me to you guys.
All right. Let's move it along. Eunice, what do you consider sort of like the big fault lines between generations, and what is it that you've seen to include into this conversation? What are those fault lines that you've seen? We're talking about respect, disrespect. What do you consider?
I have a home to go to, and I have some Gen Zs to go to, and around here I have to interact with them, so I'll be careful. But I think I just want to say that over generations, now that I look back, I think my parents did and continue to do the best they could with what they knew and had. And honestly, I guess if they had opportunities like the Gen Zs claim they have, they would probably have behaved the same way. What am I saying? I'm saying that at this point in time, we act on respect or opinions based on what we know now and what the platform offers us. Just because we kept quiet during perhaps my parents' time didn't mean we didn't have an opinion. And so Gen Zs, we do have opinions. But we didn't have the platforms that you have now to continuously have these conversations, but we had opinions, and those opinions went around, and we were influenced by each other in those opinions. And trust me, our parents made decisions based on our opinions without them knowing they were doing it. So we were also smart enough to know that. So I think what I'm going to say is respect, disrespect, with what, I'm trying to look for the right words. I will say this, with what you have now and what you see. I think respect for sure is earned, and it's similar for all generations. So I want to say to you, Gen Zs, to the millennials, to the who, I don't know,
Xers.
all those, I think you can almost sit back and say that we have opinions, but when someone is disrespectful, you kind of all agree there.
What is disrespect?
Exactly. You will all see it. So it's not a definition because
Right.
it's earned,
Mhm.
but you can tell. So when someone shouts over nothing, it's disrespectful. It doesn't matter what generation they're in.
As a form of protest, perhaps.
Protesting is not disrespectful. It's sharing an opinion in a very different way. That's my belief.
Okay, let's get the perspective of the other Gen Z. What is respect and what is disrespect?
I believe of utmost importance in having this conversation of disrespect and respect, we need to consider the context within which we are having these conversations. As has been pointed out, shouting to your children or to your parents, that's disrespectful. But contextualize it in an act of protest, that falls at the center of an action that is of utmost respect, not just unto yourself, not just unto your peers, but unto the world in general. So when we think of disrespect or respect, our minds should not focus necessarily on the weight that the words themselves carry, but where we happen to find these words. The context itself gives unto us more meaning than just throwing words around. I've been called disrespectful by virtue of my generation. You need not know me, but by virtue of seeing how I interact with the world around me, the basic assumption is I am disrespectful. We live in a post-colonial world, in a post-colonial nation. Notions of disrespect that we hold, what I would consider disrespectful might not be what the next person necessarily considers disrespectful. And we need to, yet again, contextualize this. What might be considered disrespectful? For instance, in some cultures, I, as a minor or as a child, cannot look at an adult. I must speak to them with my head bowed. And yet I'm sure a vast majority of the people in the room might agree. If I look at an adult, that is not disrespectful. And so the context really gives meaning and weight to the words that we're using.
All right, I want to get some views from the audience. Where is the microphone? And so we're going to do this. You raise your hand. You say which generation you represent. Okay. Don't tell us your age, just give this gentleman. Just don't tell us your age, but just tell us your generation.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Syed Mohammed Ali Mahdi. I am a Gen Z. So, for what I have to say is, you see, by determining disrespect or respect always depends on the context. For an example, if I am on the matatu and an older lady comes, I will get up and give her my seat. But if the old lady comes and still shouts at me and says, "Oh, you're disrespectful, oh, you run the whole place," and like this, I'll still do the same thing because that's a disrespect if I don't give her the seat for her age or his age. However, it also depends because when you're having a meeting with somebody or you're handling business, there is no age because we're all equal in one way or the other. That's the way I see it. And I know that from a humanitarian point of view, it makes sense because ultimately we all need to be tolerant of each other in order to have a better society. That's what I think.
All right, thank you. Very well spoken. There's this gentleman here.
Kindly stand. Good evening. So my name is Dr. Salim, colloquially known as Gen Z, Dr. Iroma Gen Z, and co-founder Medics for Kenya, aka, lakini msituite hivyo, Dr. Iroma Andamano. So we have a thin line between the respect and disrespect. For example, even the way we were raised, for us here, I see there are students and guys my age. How many are firstborns and secondborns? Yeah. How many are thirdborns and lastborns? For the firstborns and secondborns, were the lastborns treated the same way you were treated? Exactly. So this shows that there's a spectrum where our parents are usually, they get softer with age in terms of raising. So sisi wenye tulikuwa firstborn, secondborns, we were raised stiffly. We were raised, it was like we were raised to be men and women of valor. But our thirdborns and lastborns,
They were raised to do what? To be around.
Yeah, just
Yeah. Not to do
darling.
anything.
Yeah, that's what you all say. You all
Yeah.
say we were tired. So it's a spectrum. Even in the medical field, Dr. Washira can attest to this. Our consultants who are older than us, they were very strict to us. For example, med school couldn't go with dreadlocks, things like tattoos, things like rings, things like necklaces. Why? There is no explanation. It's just you should do this and you should go by this way. But for us, Gen Z, me, I'm borderline Gen Z and millennial, but I'm more on the Gen Z.
What does that even mean? But anyway, whatever that is.
Not because you are just before the year ends.
Yeah.
Yeah. So we just chunguliad like this. So there's that borderline.
Right.
And we've been getting for us, how we've been raised by our parents. My mom has been telling me, there's one statement our parents usually tells us, unapenda argue sana. And this is usually when you want to articulate a point, or when you feel like you need something to be changed, or you need to be heard. But for our parents, it's linear. For us, we are in a tangential field of understanding. But for our parents, it was linear. There was no bending. So I feel
the rules were the rules. They
Yes.
must be followed the way they are.
Yes.
All right. That's a good perspective. The lady here, before I get to the gentleman.
Good evening. I'm Fanny Sandalo, BSM student, 2026 class,
Which generation? You represent?
millennial,
Millennial.
nachungulia Gen Z.
Go ahead.
I wish to use an example of, was it Mohammed, if I got you right? We get to a matatu. We relate to those days of Michuki. Those who know Michuki, we are the same level. You get to a matatu, it's full. This old lady or this old man comes in. He can see the matatu is full. I'm seated, belted. You expect kwani ni respect. I unbelt, nishuke ukae ufunge mshipi. If you think you are getting late, get at the stage on time. Tusumbuane. Number two, when I don't do what you've told me, it's not disrespectful. Try to find out why am I not doing what you're telling me. Maybe you are wrong. Doesn't mean when you're older than me, you are always right. Then, and like as my colleague said, it's contextual. In a church, you come in, it's full. The seats are full, you're coming. I'll give you a seat. That is being respectful, but not like in a matatu. Please, tuheshimiane itakuwa bora. Thank you.
All right. I'll come to you. Let's get to this other lady.
Hi, my name is Mildred. I'm a millennial, but I identify as a Gen Z. So my question or my comment is, where is the place of values? Because at the end of the day, I've worked with consultants, I've worked with different people who say that I also went through residency the same way. We were treated the same way. So does it mean that just because we've done the same thing wrong, are we always continuously going to pull that? And are we going to, there's one thing that we keep talking about, pouring out your traumas to other people. Can't you heal? So yes, you were beaten. So the better ways to be able to do that. I'm not saying that we should be in discipline, but I'm just saying that as the world continues to grow, then you equally need to be able to grow. So as you look at our programs, how do you incorporate technology You'll still have someone who will still insist on dictating notes. My friend, there's PowerPoint. There's other ways of doing things. But we're just stuck there where we're saying about respect and disrespect. But the values that you have, Bana, they're just so cliche, and you still expect people to treat you with utmost respect. So where is your value? What do you stand for? What do you advocate for? So at the end of the day, if you want people to be kind, are you showing kindness? If you want people to be patient with you, are you being patient with them? So if I am approaching someone and telling them about something that has gone wrong, that will go wrong when you're in different setups, how do you expect other people to be able to react to you? So at the end of the day, I keep saying there's work to be done, there's a problem to be solved. Your child can come up and say that they're pregnant. Do you kill them? There's a pregnancy to be taken care of. So there's a lot of things that we need to be able to put in mind when you're talking about respect and disrespect, and putting in perspective, what are your values? What do you stand for? When I stand for justice, when I stand for integrity, then I'll be able to treat this young doctor with so much love and patience and kindness to be able to nurture him, to enable him to grow to where I am also. But right now it looks like it's a popularity contest that now the person who is liked the most is the one who gets the end of the bargain. No, we should all have equal opportunities to pursue life and also treat us like humans. Just because you've suffered, it was not our fault. And if it was, we are sorry. Let's move on.
All right. Yes, let me finish with this gentleman. Yes.
Okay, Master Sanda.
Yes.
I
Your
wanted
name,
to
please.
address the issue of
What's your name and the generation you represent?
okay, my name is Yana Ochak, employer Co. I wanted to address the issue that my friend Dr. has talked about raising the elder siblings and the younger siblings. So categorically nimejipata kwa the last born. So when my brother as the firstborn always tell me something like, you don't know who our real father is. Why? The way our father treated him and the way he treated me, he found it like we are in two different worlds. Why? He felt like I was raised in a lower tone. I was raised like a lastborn who tunasema tulibembelezwa. But when you look at it in a way that in this real life, even when I'm addressing my older brother, I should address him as a parent. Why? He feels like he's the one who brought us up as a parent. Because the way he was being treated, he was treated hardly.
As a deputy parent, I've had that
Exactly.
today.
So
Yes.
he behaves like he's the deputy.
Yeah.
So as even as now, when I'm approaching them,
With respect.
I have to.
Yes.
But I also wanted to address the issue of raising a voice and lowering the voice. But we have something called lower intonation and higher intonation. When we Africans, we believe that a higher intonation means someone, when someone is addressing you with a higher intonation, he means he's serious, right? But when you are talked within a lower intonation, we even me as a younger sibling, I will take it like you are not serious with me.
All right. Let's come here, and then I'm coming back to this step. Let's address the question of values, which has come, quite a lot. I've heard that there's a generation that really requires things to happen the way they're supposed to happen. You need to, at this age, you need to marry. At this age, you almost need to die at this age. Like, it's very prepared. You must go through these processes of life. There's others who are like, it doesn't matter. Whatever happens, happens. All right? It happens when it's supposed to happen. Let me start from the final end. Well, where do you stay in this question of values? And for instance, the question of marriage, is it a big thing?
I'd like to go to my own experience, or at least what I value most in life. The only constant is change itself. I hold on to this notion, this idea very strongly, very fervently. What I value is not going to be what the next person values. I hold on to the notion that the path I will take in life must not align with the path of another. I am fully of the conceptualization and of the idea that I don't need to do any particular thing in life. I hold very strongly onto the notion that whilst I might value marriage and the next person might not, that's not to say that I do not, that's okay. Society grows from the grand diversity of notions and ideas, and I think that's why we're having this conversation. The notion of perspectives. On the notion of marriage, I believe the general idea that most people have is that Gen Z does not want to get married. Gen Z is scared of marriage. But that doesn't necessarily hold fully for an entire generation to clump them up into a box and say, this is who you are, this is what you stand for. Whilst yes, the notions of identity that are granted upon us by the generations that we happen to so fall in might have an influence on who we are and what it is we value in life. I believe that it is wrong, or at least unsound, to categorize people in these boxes that we've made up. Or
Can I ask you differently?
Yes,
Are you worried about marriage?
definitely.
Why?
At times, I am pushed to believe that the notion of marriage is at times an economic one.
You're a very philosophical gentleman.
Yeah,
Thank you. Thank you. And your notions and Eunice. Let me get Eunice, perhaps if she can help. Eunice, did you worry about marriage? Was it a thing that you had to do in your time? I'm making assumptions, of course, but
Yeah, well, in my time, first of all, he's spoken so well, hasn't he? I kind of am agreeing with him. Can you imagine? I'm agreeing with Gen Zs. Now, for our time, yeah, marriage was a thing.
Mhm.
Marriage was a thing. It was an achievement, a milestone.
Right.
It was a stage.
okay. I want to have you hang on to this thought because we're going on a break on NTV. We'll be right back in less than 2 minutes. Hang on to the question of marriage and the question of values, because CT has things to say about this. We'll be right back. Don't go too far. All right. Right. Welcome back to Live Conversations, the questions of generations and the coalitions of generations as it's happening live on the set and live with my panelists and with the audience. City, straight question. Was marriage an important thing when you're growing up, that it had to happen? If anyone within your generation didn't marry, was it a problem? Or was a thing that, like everyone says, it's a notion, a concept of time and you could have just spaced out?
If you weren't married by a certain age, the question was asked very simply, what is wrong with that person? Yes, and it wasn't a polite question. Marriage gave you a sense of identity. It made your parents happy, and they saw themselves as grandparents, and it gave them a new set of relatives. And the one notion that wasn't considered then, which is one that I find younger people skirting around, is the place that love plays, or the role that love has in a relationship or in a marriage. And here I'm talking about two types of love. The Western concept of love, the one where your thought processes and all logical forms of functioning abandon you. And the very notion of breathing is problematic when you are in the presence of a certain individual. Your eyesight fails you from time to time. And then there's perhaps the generational concept of love, which was embedded in respect. And how it was viewed in an African context. There are those who argue, it's a perspective that for many African women, the love that your husband showed you was one of respect. It was a polygamous community. The first wife the opinion was always sought. In fact, they were given the opportunity to look for the co-wife. But the love that we speak of that has a lot of emotion driven in it, one derived from one's children, one's female friends. That's where you had this love that you couldn't compare with what the husband provided for you. And that is why in many of our communities, a woman was known by her name, where she came from, and her father's name. It was never Mrs. So-and-so. And the only time it changes when they had a child, you are then the mother of so-and-so. That's the time your identity got compromised. But before then, you were always yourself, the daughter of so-and-so who comes from such and such a place. If you had more than one child, you probably were now called the mother of the last born. It was an identity. But the respect that the husband showed was what was considered a concept of love. However, that has changed because there are events that come around February that determine the demonstration of that feeling that I described earlier on. And the manifestation is the death of very many plants, red plants, that have to be given for this particular occasion. Libation has to take place. Your savings have to be depleted. All this in the name of love, which hopefully ought to get you to marry.
Okay. Zaha, Gen Z, is marriage an important thing? It's okay to speak your heart.
Definitely. So, yeah, so I believe marriage is important, but it's not a goal, it's an experience. I also don't think it's right for us to dissociate responsibility, respect, and love from what the context of marriage is. And I think one key thing that happens with us Gen Z is that we believe many things can exist at the same time for us. And these different plates of life allow me to understand that you can love me with your words, but I'd also want to look at your actions. And I'd also want to look at how you are responsible with my emotions and my existence within this sharing of our love. So what I think has changed over time, or rather what we as Gen Z are trying to cut, is the fact that I don't look at marriage as a stepping stone for me to have an identity that is any better from who I am. I believe I need to work on myself, and the person who is literally the best fit for who I am in my experience will meet me there. And like being put in a situation whereby I have to sort of outsource that validation and bring it to a union and have to live with that person for the rest of my life and deal with the resentment that comes over time out of the virtue that you'll have to change to necessarily fit into their context of what you're supposed to be to them. And I feel like that is exactly what we detach. I want to exist in whatever I am, and you exist in whatever you are. The only difference is that I want us to do it together. And I equally don't look at marriage so forced. I know there's a wedding, go in front of them. So we also don't believe in that too. We are also in this part where we think I'll probably go to Ibiza and have a private dinner, call 6 of my friends, and we get engaged with the Attorney General and fly him back home, and as we have a bash like till the next morning, or probably wake up on Monday and be like, guy, we got married, right? And it won't, I think it has moved for so long because I also think for us, love has taken a trajectory of we have so much to give. And so the only difference between the love that I have for my partner and the love that I have for my friends is probably to the intimacy perspective. Otherwise, I experience love like I'm in a marriage with all my friends every single time. I show up for them. I give them the best experience that I can have. I will buy you flowers on Valentine's. I will take you out for dinner. And these are my friends. But the only difference is that, of course, the spectrum to which I'll share with my partner, I will not share with anyone else. And so the fact that we are able to share that type of love with different types of persons and different types of people who hold different regard in our lives, then marriage does not necessarily become the central point that I look to get that love from. And so the fact that I have that diversity, and it's the same way we have this language called choosing families. For us, we choose, man, honestly speaking. I can choose a brother right now. I can choose a mom. I can choose a dad. And we cut off whatever blood ties are because our journeys are very different. And life will put you in a very difficult place where the people who you love the most might be the ones to cause that pain. So what do you do at that point? Since you have the obligation as a human being to respect the fact that you have blood ties with them, I choose different family and keep loving and keep living over and over again without being put in a box.
Okay. I have a sneaky feeling you have a different perspective, but let me not go for it. But what is your point of view on marriage?
So I think I'm with Eunice because we were raised by the generation of CT. So your parents from when you were young told you, in fact, because we've had conversations where one of the stresses that older single women have is nobody raised you to be single. And the world saw you in a different light because you didn't get married. That's
all right.
That's...
I'd have to hold on. Okay, welcome back. Well, welcome back, our viewers on NTV. We're having the live conversation series coming to you live from the Aga Khan University. The discussion this evening is Generations Collide. And Mumbi was on the microphone and she was telling us how marriage is important for your generation. Please go ahead.
Yes, so that's true because that's the way we were nurtured. We were nurtured to know that at a certain time you did certain things. I think when I listen to the Gen Zs and their view, we have to recognize that they have been raised in a world where they are the most divorces. So this generation has seen parents separating over and over, which is not—
Because marriage is not a goal.
Yeah, so us, yes, that's what I'm saying. So they've experienced divorce the most. We didn't. So the generation before us, when my mom got married, she stayed on to the very end. So the modeling, and that's why I said nurture is very powerful.
And you would do the same thing.
I would do the same. Then
even
what
when you're not happy.
No, but our generation has changed a bit because we traveled, we went to what City was saying, the definition of the European love and how it was demonstrated. So we went to school. So there's a bit of that of saying, actually, we can do something different. I don't have to stay in an abusive marriage. I'll try and go to counseling and try and redeem what is there and try and see whether I can keep the, but if it doesn't, that's why divorce was like, I am not going to stay in this abusive marriage. What we've demonstrated to our children is that sometimes that commitment isn't there. So we were raised to know that you stayed in a marriage to raise your children, to respect your husband, to make sure all those things. The generations that we have raised haven't seen that consistency. So they question and they see, why do I need to, if this is what I see my parents. So, but I think the value we held in our generation for marriage was true. We wanted to raise children and we wanted to have what my parents, and I believe what I stood for, a solid foundation for our children. That's what we say, that a strong family actually raises strong children. And that's how we were raised.
Zaha disagrees.
No, okay, I completely respect your perspective, but no, the strongest of families have produced the weakest of children. In fact, sick, because all of us are having mental health issues most of the time. Out of that categorization, okay, what am I saying? I'm saying parents need to separate their experience from how we choose to live. that I might have seen violence in my home state since I was born, but I will not consciously choose to do the same because I would want to exist in better. And so when you're raising me, you need to stop raising me from a productivity of your experience. I'd want you to look at me not as you raising me in the things that you didn't get to do that you would want to, but I'd want you to allow me to experience life out of the best version of yourself that you would have wished.
So what do you think is it that the parents or the generations that is above is not getting with that experience? What is the one thing that we're not
That
getting?
your experience is yours, and let me finish it, that the trauma you have been able to allocate from your experience is also your own obligation to heal. Unfortunately. And so when you choose to heal the traumas you have accumulated over time, you will not project it to everyone around you. That's all. Because if I have been beaten all my life, it doesn't necessarily mean that I have to beat the hell out of my kids until they understand what I am understanding. And for as long as you separate that, the lens to which you will look at your children is from the fact that you will open a new page, not for you to write, but for you to write together. That's all you need to do.
The appreciation is what you see and how we raise our children, which is what I like, that they have a choice. They actually have a choice of how do I separate what I saw in my parents and what I choose for myself. And I think that's what she's saying. I can choose to do it differently because that choice is available. And I think then you end up with a more healthier, more whole individual because they're able to deal with the trauma and separate themselves from whatever trauma they have been raised in.
Right.
Yeah.
But do human beings actually function that way?
Yeah.
How do we learn? Do we learn with our eyes? Do we learn with our ears? How do we learn? Experience. And what is experience?
Living.
Yes, it's
Yeah.
living. And no. Everybody learns in the same way. It's everybody learns in the same way. If we go back to the idea and concept of marriage, let's start with what it is that people expect marriage to be and what they believe it should be. Consider for a second that marriage is not intended for love and happiness. It's meant to help you grow up.
All right. Okay, so before I go to the philosopher. I mean, so let's bring in another perspective before I go to my audience. Where do we put the place as we discuss about marriage and values to the next question about political consciousness? All right. Let's include this into the debate and the conversation, that at what point is the way Gen Z handling sort of the dissatisfaction with the public a better way of managing politics vis-a-vis the boomers who are silent and angry and protested with silence? All right. Let me start with the city as I move that side. The current political dissatisfaction in this country.
I didn't think I would see what I saw with what is referred to as a Gen Z uprising. It is one of the best things I've ever seen in my life.
One of the what?
Best.
All right.
Because what people of my generation thought or felt, and the confusion we lived through, because when you have parents who were brought up in the colonial era, they were among the first people to take over the jobs that the colonialists had. They themselves are confused because many of them are brought up in traditional homes and they're trying to fix and fit in with this modern life they've been introduced to. And then you come along and they're now trying to fit you into this thing. So you don't see it then, but as you get older, you realize you went through a bit of an identity crisis somewhere along the line, because the things you wanted to be were not really what you wanted to be, but what you thought would project you in a correct life. Now the Gen Zs come along, those are our children, and they do not give a hoot, okay? And they act as they think. It is one of the most refreshing, it's one of the most spontaneous, it's one of the most dangerous things I've ever seen a group of people do. And yet, if you look at how change has come to society, it's followed that same path. If not by groups, but individuals. People talk about 2010 Constitution. The path to it, people died. People were detained. In those days, we didn't have a 2010 constitution. You could be detained. You could actually disappear. In fact, you could be jailed and people forget you're jailed. Then one day someone remembers, hey, what happened to so-and-so? He's in jail. Oh, hatukumtoa. Oh, wait. I'm simply saying that what we saw collectively with the Gen Z was what individuals had been doing over time. They led the way, and because people felt what they felt, they had a following. That's how it works.
Right. Let me go to the philosopher. Political dissatisfaction and how it's being dealt with.
I think our first thoughts should be on the notion of how change itself, as I mentioned, is one of the only constants. But with respect to an undertaking, with respect to an oppressive set of rules that have been set, or maybe not rules, but a people who are under the actions of oppression, you cannot negotiate with your oppressor, or at least you cannot let your oppressor define the very rules by which you are to fight for your liberation. Liberation itself is a violent act. That is not to say that it is engulfed by violence itself, but for true liberation to be found, there is some need or some level of violence that will be required. Because in the eyes of the oppressor, you will never do right if you are not choosing to be the oppressed.
Do you always speak like this? Very refreshing. It is. Yes.
Yeah, coming after
I could
him,
listen to you the entire time.
yeah,
Yes.
coming after him is becoming a challenge now. I kind of agree with what has already been said. For me, call me old school, but honestly speaking, I enjoyed it all. I loved it. It was
You
refreshing.
didn't participate.
How do you know?
I'm asking. It's a question.
I plead the fifth because I need
Your
to do my
generation
job.
pleads the fifth a lot.
Yeah. But what I'll tell you is, it's funny that I grew up with a parent who was a renegade, who would, for political reasons, stay out, protest, and do the things I saw Gen Zs do, but the only difference was they were not many. So what would happen to people like my father is that they would be honestly put as defiant, and it became so difficult for him, but he had the same zeal, he spoke the same way, and I was listening to all of them and I was like, that sounds like my father. And but these ones are on steroids. I think theirs was just a lot. But it was very interesting to see that this generation, I can actually say, believe me, it's what he's saying, it's been done before in a different way, but my father was a protester. What I saw them do, he did. How he spoke about politics and the oppressor, he spoke exactly the same way. So I agree with it. I want it to continue. I pray it does. And I can assure you, I'll be in the streets with you, but probably.
Zaha, the political, dissatisfaction and how Gen Zs are dealing with it. So talk to me around that. Use your words.
Oh, as a key victim of a clear overview of how oppressive the existing, I say regime, let me sit well. So I happened to be in the Mandamanos from the beginning to the end. First of all, without my parents' knowledge, because I know the panic attack that comes with it. And I was a very good product of showcasing just how intensely important it was for us to go to the streets, because we were working with medics. And the first thing that we got during the June 25th, when people got to Parliament, is the police had the audacity to tell me and a couple of other doctors that mrudi huko, tunao wengine wengi, muletewe mtibu. And so the reality around the fact that we had people who are supposed to offer protection to us as citizens, doing what the Constitution fully supports us to do, that they can affirm themselves to murder, and that they can affirm on the destruction of lives of young people, because everyone knew it was a Gen Z protest. Everyone knew probably there'll be very, very young fellas going to that protest. And with how we were murdered and how we were abducted and how they downplayed the abductions up until now when the IG of police has announced it, showcases just how important it was for us to actually get out of our houses in the first place. Because if we never spoke, and let me bring parents to the reality of what was happening. For every Gen Z that did not come outside to the streets, we were also validating them for doing a lot of work online. And so that's why, again, Kenyans are celebrating all over Twitter today because Whitman has resigned. And people don't know that Gen Z spent all the last 1 week of nights telling how why we are very dissatisfied. And it's these opinionated motives from us Gen Zs that are equally, of course, not very much accepted and welcomed in mainstream society that have pushed most of these amendments to happen without a lot of frustration caused back on us. So I feel like I have been dissatisfied from IEBC from the time we casted those votes. I have been dissatisfied with the fact that we have to remind people what they took a Bible and swore an oath to the people to do. That for me to have to sit down and walk in the streets to remind you that you are obligated to do to Kenyans what you took an oath to is what is disturbing for us. That we have to remind you of your actual job that has a job description in the Constitution that you can access to in case you forget that what your job is. The fact that I have to live my day-to-day life in fear, in constant dissatisfaction. I have to have so many other stepping stones to be able to get success that every other youth is having in every other part of the country is exactly why we have a problem. Right now, we can't access healthcare. I don't know if it has ringed on Kenyans that people are dying because you can't access healthcare. You cannot, as a farmer, share seeds. It's ridiculous that we are sitting down smiling with these fellas when they know predominantly well what they're doing. You can't travel. There's some roads that were built during Mwai Kibaki's time and they're still being used right now and it's impossible. And so even when we want to go back to Shago to see our grandparents, it's impossible because the parent is also looking at, have you seen the fuel prices? How are we going? These spikes and hikes have demonstrated in a lot of, again, authoritarian and totalitarian authorities and systems that governments such as this end up collapsing economies. And when an economy collapses, I kid you not, we have seen it in Palestine, we have seen it in Afghan, we've seen it in Sudan and Congo. The youth, the women and the children bear the bait, unfortunately. And when you suppress the most vulnerable in the society, just because you cannot do your job right, then we are obligated to stand and protest until you leave.
All right. Very well said. Very well said. You can talk around that. I know it's difficult, but you can.
It's very difficult to follow her. But when you think about the June as a parent, I was sitting in my house that day. I was working from home. Most of us worked from home that day. I still remember 25th, and thinking of all the young people that were going out and with the vow that they were going to do this peaceably, and watching some of our children within the estate actually walking out of the estate and going out and knowing and giving them the piece of advice that this is peaceful, and they went out and did the walk to a certain distance and all that followed. I think for me, the most important thing is when I look at the corporate world and how that event has changed and will change the corporate world, is we need to allow for opportunities for people to speak up. So we need to encourage listening a lot more. And we have an opportunity every time we sit down, not just with Gen Z, but I think with everyone, to listen to what is it that they value, what is their expectations in an environment. So whether you're sitting in an office and the manager is trying to create something new, get the views of everyone, listen to what would make a difference for them and what matters to them. I think that's the realization for me during that period, that listening is important, because when we listen, then we understand the people better, and then we can create a better future for everyone, not just for one generation, but for everybody else. So the act of listening and the opportunities presented whether it's in a society or whether it's in a corporate environment, is one of the ones that I took out, and I'm sure many of us have taken out in the workplaces. How do we allow people to actually express themselves without having go to the extreme? Because what you don't want to get to the place of extreme. You want to give opportunities so that as often as you can, people give you feedback and they share their ideas. The safety of creating an environment for what we call psychological safety. How safe is it for me to actually come and view and share my view like she's doing? It's safe for her to say the things that make her dissatisfied. That's not that's not a wrong thing. It is saying this is how I feel and this is what I value. And because of what I value, this is what I expect. So everybody should be creating an environment for psychological safety. Whether you're a parent, allow your children to know that they can share their views in this environment so that you create an environment in the office or at the family that is acceptable for
You think the
everyone.
corporate world is ready for this?
I think the corporate world is going through a transformation. I really think so. We are finding ourselves creating and training managers to really know how to listen. How do they collect ideas? We have pulse checks. At my organization, which is Absa, we do pulse check. We do the annual surveys for employees, but we also have these town halls, and those are town halls for open mic. So an open mic is similar to here, where you allow employees to challenge leadership on matters that are important to them. So there's a transformation that's going on in the corporate world, and it's a good transformation. Yeah.
Okay, I want to go back to the audience in 1 second as I allow the NTV crew to go for the news at 6:54, but the conversation continues here. Thank you very much for your company. We are also online. You can follow this conversation as it continues. Let me go straight to the audience. I want to pick out thoughts on the question on what we've had about the transformation that is happening in the corporates, the transformation that's happening in politics, and how that fits and how that looks like. Where's the microphone? All right. This is with this gentleman here.
Thank you very much. Thank you very much. I was born in 1985. So I'm a muse. I'm the father of these people called Gen Z. They are wonderful people. But we must also understand that in the developmental psychology of our people, there are things that need to be considered. We cannot just rise up and say everything that we see and everything that we perceive, just because it's popular, is right.
Give me an example.
Sorry?
Give me an example.
For example, how do we embrace technology and how do we apply the things we get in the tech space? If, for those of us who grew up a bit before you, when I was ignorant, I used to watch movies in my days of ignorance. Then I came to realize that these are programs. And programs are commands that have been installed in a device ahead of you turning on the device. So that when you turn on the device, it will bring out that which is been commanded to bring out. Now, these are people who are living on phones. Those are devices. So they bring out those devices and they think it's a real place. And a phone is not a real place. So now, where is the place of your development psychologically as a human being? What is the future of creativity if we are going to live in a world like this? Now, in the interest of time, this issue of the generation can take too long. But I want to give a word of advice that good leaders are readers. They are not watchers of TikTok and these other funny things that are coming up. So kindly, after this, go and look for some books to read. You want to be a real philosopher, especially books by Dr. Amos G. Wilson. Pick out this specific one, The Developmental Psychology of a Black Child. You will know what is there what the world is competing about, and why Black people as a race, you're being pushed into a certain corner for the superiority of the others. Thank you.
And you said I can't find this on phone, this book. I
You
can't
can
find
find it, yeah. You just, yeah.
Thanks.
You can find it.
Anyway. Yes. Let the microphone move this side. Yes.
Hi, everyone. My name is Koi Gaku. I'm a content creator and a social media influencer. And I would just like to...
You basically live on phone.
Yes. And I just wanted to say something on what he said, that if you want to be a real philosopher, you don't have to, spend your time on phone. Exactly. We're in a time and space where these are some of the ways we make money. I host a show, I am paid for that. A brand will reach out to me and say, oh, Koi, we've seen your content. We want to work with you. Could you make this amount of videos for us? And we'll pay you this amount of money. But I don't know what the problem with the older generation seeing us making money through, it's deemed as laziness. Oh, unashindanga tu kwa simu, unaeka kamera, wanakulipa. Yes, because we are not glorifying suffering. I don't want to sit, I don't want to sit in a 9-to-5 job where I know my boss is a narcissist. He's always shouting. He's come, to the office in a bad mood. And because I need the money at the end of the week or at the end of the month, I have to sit here and take in everything he or she is saying. I don't want that. So if I look around and I'm like, okay, I'm good in making videos, I'm good, in front of the camera, I can make money from that. It's not about what you have up here. It's about what you can offer out here. It's about the skills that you have. So I am sorry, but no, I'm not sorry. I do not agree with that, especially coming from the point of someone who is always on social media, because that is my main source of income. Iyo mkate na kulanga every single morning. It is because of that, those 2 minutes I have spent on my phone, mine. That is where it has come from. So I am not going to take that. And if that's what you believe, that's okay. I'm from a different generation and that's not how we do things around here.
Wow. That microphone should go the way it is going. Yes, to the gentleman.
Just mine is just one thing also.
Are you a philosopher?
She's on TikTok, I'm on Twitter. So we were waiting for this topic. We were eagerly waiting. Hata ni vizuri CNTV hawaonyeshi sasa. Yes. The amount of money that we make through social media compared to employment, I can tell you right now, is almost 10 times. I can host with a space with Smart on Twitter just for 45 minutes, and the amount of money that I will be paid is half my salary. So social media right now is very dynamic. It's very powerful. So that was on the social media. And then, because you asked us a question about the political side, I feel like we have been so hard on our older generation. Something that has been changing currently is they have started to become easier with the current political effects, because it's now affecting them. It's affecting their salary. So they are seeing Chief is cutting 2.5. And SSF is going to cut 6% in January. So, for example, my mom told me, naenda maandamano lini tena? Because they know, now they are feeling it. The only problem is we want your input. The moment you have your input, we are going to change this country for the better. Thank you.
Okay. Pass it on to the gentleman. Yes.
Okay.
Yes, please stand.
Hi, my name is Shano. I am a Aga Khan University student. So first on what he just said, so just the future doctors you have, a lot of them will be half YouTube doctors. So that whole process of going to get a book like Gaitons in the library or Ganongs or whatever other last anatomy, it takes so long that you could grasp this concept in a very short time and improve your life in a very shorter time as compared to anything we had before. But now, on just the political climate.
I feel like he needs to respond, but anyway, continue.
The question you asked on the political climate, first of all, one thing my generation is known for is being very opinionated. So please accept my opinion. So my opinion is Gen X, Gen Y, Gen Z, baby boomers, whoever you are, this is a Western concept. So you're all being told by the West what box you should fit in. And as Africans, you are psychologically accepting that box. Because even if we define a baby boomer by the Western standard, a baby boomer is a child of someone who had just left war. If I'm not wrong, that's why they're baby boomers. You have more time to have children because there's no more war. Do we share the same disparity? You know, like ask yourself, are our Gen Zs really the definitive Gen Z? Does the Gen Z start from 1996 or 1995 in an African setting where we have a low to middle income situation? So further back, this I'm sure everyone is familiar with the Nairobi people and the Ushago people. These are wokeness factor. So some of your children are allowed to be proper Gen Zs because they have access to information through this same device. This is what allows some of us to be proper Gen Zs. But some of us don't even hold the exact same notion because you don't even have access to that information. So with just the political scene, I feel like some of these things are human reactions. So for example, aside from the West, where we had, I don't know, civil war in America, and we had the wars of the Anglo-Saxons and the Gauls in Europe, just within here, let's consider what some have said on the panel. Colonialism. What did colonialism mean to us? How can we define our generations now in an African setting as per from that time? My mother gave me a theory of why, for example, a lot of us wouldn't support marriage. And it's not in line with why Western Gen Zs will not accept marriage. She said, colonial man came. Remember in Kenya, it was a concept of divide and conquer, divide and rule. So that means when we had concentration camps and all of that, these colonialists came and destroyed African traditional society. So if there was anything working in an African traditional society perspective, this is my theory and with my mom, it stopped there. We have, for example, the Kikuyus forced into Nairobi. They became Shushainas, women became the ones who came here. Some of them became prostitutes because, I mean, what's back at home means lack of freedom. That's what you have. And then that person is supposed to raise another generation. So the generation that comes from those who left colonialism are meeting people who had, in some perspective, lost their morals. Not their morals, lost what was essentially African traditional society. This person is tired from a colonial perspective, and now they have to raise people. These people who are children to these people who are tired don't get anything passed down to them. You trickle down, now we have what we have like divorce rates and all of that. Yet in the African traditional society perspective, there were mechanisms to take care of all of this. I'm not saying they're right or wrong or whatever, but at the same time, some of the reasons why you think they are wrong or right is because the Western man has told you this is how it should be.
All right.
That's why it is wrong and right.
Okay. All right.
Yeah. Okay, I can end there.
And
Yeah.
I need to get the other perspective. Let me get the gentleman. Okay, yes, the gentleman behind you. If you can give me your thoughts in a minute, it would be fantastic.
Yes, political thoughts.
Yes.
I'm Zachary. I have 4 names. Let's just stick to Zachary.
Which generation?
Generation X, last born.
Yeah.
I am having a problem with Generation Alpha, who are my children, but that's not the point. The point is that I have changed my perception towards Generation Z. I had negative thoughts about Generation Z as disrespectful children, but as a result of what happened, the political differences and the political change that happened a few months ago, I've literally changed my perception towards Generation Z. In fact, hata nasema waeke sanamu hapo Moi Avenue, iwekwe hapo karibu na Tomboya, waekewe sanamu hapo. I want to really thank you for this kind of reopening of the way we think, my generation, we were not very, what do you call it? Very open. We are not very open, basically. I'm trying to look for the other word. So Generation Z basically changed my perception towards that we need to speak out. I remember very well that I used to complain so much, and I was asking myself and my friends, is there going to be a revolution in this country? And thank God for Generation Z. You are God-given. You're a blessed people. If I was a grandfather like this guy, the guy I listen to a lot, Spice FM, CT, I like you. I like your show. I will bless you, and I will just bless your descendants and everything. That is Gen Z. So thank you so much for the revolution. I hope you're going to continue the revolution. For us who are Generation X, last bonds and millenniums, we will join you in case of other issues that will come up.
All right, thanks. Before I get to you, let me read some comments from online. Geoffrey Muga says, I'm a millennial. My question to the panel is, how can we balance values to gain respect to be at the level playing field with other generations? Someone will answer that. Another one is John Chomba says, married people live longer and healthier lives, especially in rural areas, contrary to urban settings. I'm reading, please. Guys, calm down. Calm down. Can I be allowed to read? Thank you. It's not me. John Chomba, we said you're respectful and open to every opinion. Says married people live longer and healthier lives, especially in rural areas, contrary to urban settings where marriage is described as a scam by Gen Z, who seem to fear responsibilities. Please, you had something to say.
Hello, my name is Mora. I'm Gen Z. I could be a boomer, but like for now, I'm Gen Z. I wanted to say something about like the person who spoke before. What I wanted to say is, I remember when we were in high school, we're reading Jane Austen, and these are one of those books that are recommended for literature because they cover so much of like social issues, and they're supposed to make you smarter and everything. And in one passage in the book, in one Jane Austen book, it's actually Northanger Abbey, she includes a defense of the novel in which she talks about how the novel was ostracized during that time. And even the people who would write the novels would make the characters in the novels to not read them because they saw the novels as being a lesser form of literature and art. Now, the point that I'm trying to say is that a lot of the older generations forget that they were young once. There's never been a point in history where the older people have not looked down on the younger people. Now it's millennials looking down on Gen Z for the internet. Right before, it was their parents looking down on them for staying on the phone too long. Right before that, it was people talking about their children spending all their time writing letters to their friends, all the way back to the Stone Age. There's never been a period in history where parents have not looked down on their children for what they call the younger generation's misdemeanors. Does that make sense? Mm-hmm. Yeah, so there's this conversation we're going to have forever, so might as well get used to it. And then the second thing that I was going to talk about was marriage. I was going to say that I disagree with some of the ways that my generation handles marriage, simply because I think that the reason why they opt out of marriage is not one that I fully support. And one of them is that I think a lot of men opt out of marriage because of the way that marriage has been talked about, especially in pop culture or just like in general conversations. Men consider marriage to be a place of confinement, like prison. They think their wives will take their money. They think their wives will take their freedom. They think they won't be able to be men. And then women leave marriage for all the way, like on the other extreme end, where they think that in marriage they're disrespected, there's no sharing of responsibilities, there's no respect, they're treated badly. And like in a generation where you have your own money, you have your own education, why would you willingly enter into a marriage that's denying you of the things that you had before you got into that union? So what I think is that the notion of marriage should be changed, because I think that quintessentially marriage is beautiful and that it can be made to be something that we desire as well. I don't think Gen Zs are inherently against marriage. I think they're against what marriage has been construed to look like. Yeah, thank you.
All right. Very well spoken. I feel this millennial has put us in a lot of problems. You need to apologize at some point because we are being attacked. Let's get to the gentleman.
My name is Nelson, and I represent Gen Z. So what I'd say is a lot in the older generation, Kitambo, the boomers, the big people before the boomers, they got into relationships and marriage out of obligation. They wanted to be taken seriously by society. They wanted to be taken as if they have something to offer. If someone had no wife, someone had no kid, they were not taken seriously. It was taken as an insult. You'd want to hear someone insulting someone else to say, "Huyu hana bibi, hana bwana, hana watoto," like you're literally useless. You're just there. But in this time and age, it's not necessarily like that. Before, women were trained from birth, from the get-go, to be wives and mothers. You're trained to cook and clean. You're told, if you don't know how to cook, you want to get married, you want to get a husband, you want to have kids, then what are you good for? There's nothing you're good for. But right now, women can exist outside marriage. Marriage doesn't have to be their entire identity. You can have a life outside it. And that's why I think most women opt out of marriage right now, because they know their rights, they know what they want, and they won't settle for less. And a lot of men don't really seem to get that, because they're not really trained by their parents on how to be good men, how to be good husbands. They're only trained to say, provide and protect. And to them, providing is just offering money, but not doing like really husband material or paternal material, like training your children to be good people in society. They think being materialistic is the only part of being a parent. And so I'd say that, well, marriage is a beautiful concept, I agree. It's not necessarily a big achievement, because literally you can get outside and get married the next day. Like, it's not a big thing. It's not a big thing.
Address CT directly. If you're not, just ask him direct questions. He prefers it that way.
It's a beautiful concept, yes, but it's not really, say, a goal or an achievement. Like, you shouldn't be praised because you have a wife or a husband. You shouldn't be praised because you have children. Nobody should take you seriously because of the number of children you have. It's not the 1850s anymore. So what I can say is, yeah, you have so much to offer than being a wife or a husband or a mother or a father. People should have an identity outside their marriages.
Thank you.
You shouldn't let marriage define you as a person.
Absolutely. Yeah. Thank you. I want adversely mention CT and Mumbi to respond, but also as they respond, and I need you to include another point of view, which is that your relationship with money, all right? Because that it's sort of you're pointing fingers. Who wants to start? Let's start with you, Mumbi.
So I think, as I said, first of all, I am a firm believer that there are things as human beings that we inherently desired. And therefore, even though we have spoken about Gen Zs, my view is how the perspective, as I said at the beginning, how we are nurtured and how we get into seeing the world. That's just how I view the generations. So inherently, every human being wants certain things. We want safety, we want to be valued, we want to contribute. No one wants to wake up and sleep every day. People want to contribute to building something. That's how you're created. And I borrow a lot of that because I am a Christian. So I also believe that marriage is instituted by God with certain principles to raise to build a community. I also believe that parents build the values that we see in their children. That's how I see it, because that's the context within which a child gets to relate to the environment is within a home. And therefore, parents have a big responsibility in building the values. I think we should raise children who believe that they want to contribute to a society positively. That's something we should all be, I think, working towards. We should raise people knowing that they are valuable. Everyone should have the identity in knowing I'm good. I come into this world to contribute. I have something I can share with the world because I'm different, I'm unique. in the way that I have been created. And that way, I think we move away from this stereotyping, because I think when you think generations, which is why I agree with some of the comments, is that there's a lot of stereotyping in saying that Gen Zs or in Gen Xers or in baby boomers. But when you sit down with Mumbi, you sit down with James, I sit down with City at an individual level and I get to know you more, I actually see what is your value and what it is that you're hoping that this life will be for you. So I think for me, that's the way I would look at it. So when you come to money, and I think there is, I'm a product, as I said.
How's your relationship with money?
I have a good relationship with money, but I can tell you that shopping is therapy for me as a woman. So when I go shopping, I just, it's therapeutic. It feels good.
Yeah.
But I also have an appreciation that at one point I'm going to retire and this monthly income will not be there, which I think is the difference between what she was saying around the fact that she can earn her money online. So for us, when I went to primary school, my headmistress told me, so many vijana mtapata kazi nzuri. That's how we were raised.
It was a lie.
Not for everyone. For everyone.
For everyone else. For you guys, it was fine. For everyone else,
That's what I'm saying. But you see, that's exactly my point. My point is the way we were nurtured. I went to class every day and I was told, if you read and you pass your exams, you go to campus, you will obviously get a good degree.
We did that. We read, we went to campus, get good grades.
But
we didn't get the work.
The world has changed. So we have to say, what is work? Because what they are redefining, which is why I agree with her and with him, is they've redefined work. Work is no longer a four-walled place. That's not it. Work is trading my skill. So in the corporate world, we've already started changing the language. The language is, what skill do you bring? It's not what certificate, because we've been hung up on certificates and stuff, and we are starting to change the language. We are starting to say, what skill do you need for today for me to deliver my strategy and for tomorrow to make my business sustainable? So we are having those conversations. So if the skill is negotiation, that's what I need. If the skill is banking, if the skill is what we call DevOps, if that's the skill I'm looking, that's what I am willing to buy from you. And that purchase doesn't have to be 30 days a month. That purchase can be 2-3 hours a day that you give me, and you give your next 2 or 3 hours to City, and the next, and that you're redefining work, which is why I really like it. That our children are saying, I will work for you for only 2 days, because the other 3 days, I actually want to go and give my time to that home, because I think I can add value to that society differently. And so we are being challenged to redefine what is the place of money, because that's the other thing they've said. What is the place of money in my life? So while for us, money, we held on, and we thought about putting everything in savings for tomorrow. They think about, how do I have impact today? And tomorrow, actually tomorrow, I will see the life different. Yeah.
You put all the money in land. Anyway, City. Yes.
When people set out to communicate, there is what is said and there's what you hear. When that fine gentleman said, read, what did you hear? He said, read. That's all he said. Read, expand your knowledge by reading. What did you hear? The responses tell me what you heard. We're being looked down upon by these ancient creatures. They think we don't read, and yet we read. They don't understand. It's probably true, but the yardstick from which we judge life is the yardstick we know, understand, and what conforms to what we call our lived experience. And when you challenge us and correct us, you're giving us an opportunity to learn. And you should challenge us. And you should tell us where we're going wrong. Because when you're older, the problem with getting older is you've been young, and so you think that because these younger people haven't been as old as you, they don't understand what you understand. Actually, they could even understand things you don't understand. But if you do not give them that opportunity to actually listen to what they're telling you, not listen to what you think they're telling you. Listen to what they're actually telling you. This plays out even in relationships. What is it that you discuss with your friends of the same gender? When you talk about expectations, what do you talk about? When you get into heterosexual relationships or any such relationship that is intimate and you haven't gone to the depth of discussing expectations, that catches up with you because expectations are the cornerstones of most relationships. And if you don't address it or you don't get into the process of learning to address it as you move along, it will catch up with you. You don't have to be married. You don't even have to have children. You just have to have somebody you relate to. Those expectations have to be at the center of the things you discuss so that someone can explain to you how they look at life. We all like to conform, so we very easily appear like we are very similar, we have the same values, and we may not have the same values. Those values now dovetail into the subject of money. I come from that school of thought where the roles that men are supposed to play in life are clear cut. You as a man is supposed to look after your family. It's not even complicated. It's not complicated. You provide. You're responsible. You protect. It's not complicated. Now, some people find it difficult to do all these things. And part of the reason is because those who are older didn't quite tell you how to go about it. They just give you the words, but didn't give you the ABC of how to go about it. But also with that notion came the understanding of a certain traditional society that required certain values for it to remain intact. We live lives that are repetitive because that's how our lives are. And so we get accustomed to them. And so the thing we resist most is change. And that's why these generational discussions always arise, because a new generation brings change with it. And we forget that the change that they bring, they've learned from us. Remember the data gathering process that I mentioned? They study their parents like they study nothing else. And there are things they swear to themselves they will never do. There are things they say they will do, but they are informed. They're not uninformed. They are very, very informed. We were informed because we studied our parents. Every generation studies their parents. A girl studies her father. That is the first male model she'll ever have. A girl studies her mother. A boy studies the mother. That's why the role model for a wife, for those who want to get married, is usually their mother. They study their father. Now there's usually a problem there because when they study their fathers, the models that many modern fathers give are, gosh, let's just leave it at that. So you find a generation of young men who don't really know what model to follow. And so they create their own. Money is important. And the talents you have must not be limited to doing one thing. What you can do, the diversity of things you can do are enormous. You've been told this, try it out and see. You will find you can actually do that. But the question that we didn't ask is, to what use do you want to put this money? Okay, you'll make it, a lot of it. There's a word I've been learning of it, it's called sherehe. And it's synonymous with a younger generation. It shouldn't be. In our time, we also had sherehe. It's just that we were limited.
You didn't have enough. You didn't have money.
The money was little. Like when Mumbi mentions being told that if you study, you'll get work. We did get work. It didn't last long. I had a letter of employment before I finished my last exam in the university. In my time, you could change jobs as you saw fit. It was true. You could work do this, forget about it, move to the next. It happened, but it changed. And our education system didn't work towards getting people to understand how they could employ themselves. So now we're struggling with it right now.
Okay. The philosopher. What's your relation? No. What's your notion of money?
When I think of money, what comes to mind is sustainability. Gen Z sees itself as being a hopeful generation in a hopeless world. And we see this especially in what we see as the climate crisis, wars that are still pending in what we might have thought would have ended in the 21st century. and it's very hard to hope. And yet we still continue to hope. It's that act of resistance, that very artistic sense of our being, to continue to exist in a world that tells you you're not supposed to be here. And in that sense of sustainability, it's, I have money, but what does this money look like in the long term? Not just for me, not just for my neighbor, but for the world at large. You have a looming climate crisis. And it's unfortunate to think about that the world we've been given only has so much. And yet, at the current rate we're going at, it just seems that we only intend to take, because you cannot give without taking. But at what point do we say, this is too much? And I think that's what we tend to ignore when we think about money, when we think about this concept that we have given value, and its value can be related to the things we can own and the things we can have. To want is not a bad thing. Want is human. It is a fundamental part of our being. But when is it that I say, I want to the extent that the world cannot give? So when we think of money, let us think not of what we can take from the world, but what we can give back. And I really appreciate the concept that was brought forward of building our skill sets. When we build ourselves, because I'm a very strong believer in how we can have our own metamorphoses, because to exist alone is not enough. To live is just another step in the right direction, but to be able to exist, to live, and to create, if we can get to that point, then we can make real differences in life.
Okay, very well spoken. That's how I came to you, for that exact. Yes. Eunice, as you give your final thoughts, do you think about money and think about sustainability and climate change, your money?
Yeah, so James, I've told you before,
I have to put you on the spot.
But finance, and before I speak on that, just as a final thought, I will not be doing justice if I don't represent millennials well in matters marriage. And I think what I'm asking for is for us to cut some grace to millennials. I am bringing up my children, and before you judge millennials, I'm bringing up my children to know that marriage is not a definition of who you are as a person. I am bringing up my children that way. So I'm not judging them for not choosing or not, or it's a principle that, funny enough, my parents also gave me. And therefore I agree with whoever said, you're putting people in a box, but funny enough, our parents, my parents, and my late father said, you know what, when you finish university, I want you to do more. It wasn't, I want you to be married. In fact, subtly he said, you do not have to get married before you are able to have your own career. So I just want you to know that we have learned from great people, and we are extending the same kind of upbringing to this generation. So we are not saying you all must be married. No. Yet it is a beautiful thing. So we are not asking you that you must, but please don't paint it as an ugly thing. It isn't. Now, finances. This one, I will speak from what I have had to read and learn. People who know finances better. For me and a lot of friends who are better in finance than I am. And the summary is financial success is more about behavior than knowledge. And with the books you will read, Money-Wise, the Kaizen, and that's where I've picked a lot of it. There are different ways. You can journal, you can write your essentials, non-essentials, etc. But one of the things I know for sure that's reality is that it's not always about how much you make. It's not always about how much you make. It's about managing what you have with good behaviors and good intentions. interestingly, even when it's little, if you are disciplined and intentional, for whatever reason, it builds up and then you get what you want. So that's how I see money. I don't see it in any other way. I don't think it's anything else except habits. Be patient, wait for it. I mean, live within your means, all those good words. And truly, that's my goal about money and finances.
Okay. Zaha, your final thoughts?
I might have a very different perspective when it comes to money, but equally because I've had to teach myself that money is not for me to accommodate and own. Money is in motion. Apart from that, it has given me a space to believe that for as long as money is in motion, it will always be there in providence when I need it and when I choose to have it around. And therefore, it gives me a space to also think about multiplication of the same money without necessarily hoarding, because I think saving is the only space where I can be able to create wealth. That has put me in spaces financially where when I think about creating wealth long-term and also having a spectrum of sustainability, that I know that the best version to be able to multiply elements of wealth within my life would be to channel money to do things for me without me having to make direct payments. And these are in economics of scale. Economies of scale will always tell you that you will have to put in money allocations in spaces where the need is divergent and continuous. So if I invest in farming, everyone is going to eat for as long as I am alive. And therefore, I can categorically innovate around the same structure. So I can move from thinking I should plant maize to thinking who produces these seeds or what is required for maize to grow so I can get into fertilizer. Or if I'm able to produce maize, what is storage? Okay, a farmer requires to take this to the market, so can I invest in transportation? It allows you to look at money from a different perspective, and your investing and the credibility of where your money comes in and out doesn't necessarily look one way. I think another thing that I've learned over the time with finances is that we have the chance and ability to do multiple things at the same time. But we have one special thing that is happening at this time with Gen Zs is that you can make money out of your hobbies and passions. And there's nothing, so I'll send all of you to go read Jordan Peterson. I'm sure some one way or another. The 12 rules for life, rule number 4, you own nothing, yet you own everything. And that would basically put you in a space whereby when I'm thinking about wealth, I am definitely going to make a business out of the one thing that I love the most, so that it reduces the scale to which I have to put in effort from a point of dislike and resentment. And so for as long as I'm putting a business or I'm making money out of something that I love, even when things get really, really hard, you have extra fuel to put into because you like what you do. And it's sustainable because, again, when you're doing what you love, love is very attractive. And so you'll end up attracting people who are probably in the same spectrum. And then that's when you create financial groupings. And those financial groupings create an economy of scale where you can circulate your money, which is circular economies. And so money is very different right now.
Money is in motion.
It's in motion. And then last thing, let's forget that money is moving from being a physical currency to a digital one. And so for some of us, we are trying to structure our economies of scale around the digital platform because that's exactly where money and ETRs are moving. And so devaluing the physical money that is often used in most economies and moving and transforming your businesses digitally might save you a bulk of hard work that you need to do that very many other organizations and generations have done. Yeah.
Amazing, amazing. These conversations can continue forever and ever, but we have to, at some point, we have to stop. This conversation is not in motion. It's not perpetuity. It's not, a digital currency that keeps on. At some point, it must end. So I'm going to give my panelists 30 seconds each to give me a final word so that we close this down. I should start here and go as I go that way.
Okay. So I think for me, it's a very good conversation and very glad that I can agree with just some of the concepts of generations. My final thought is generations will live with each other. They've always lived with each other. So we are not the first people to live with multiple generations. They'll always do. I think the concept of we value people, we listen to each other, we create the world we want is important. And we need to hold that for everyone so that we listen to them and they listen to us in terms of what is our expectation. I think I have to say from a corporate perspective, that's important as well, because we need to learn how to manage people differently. We need to listen to what the ideas are, because that creates a very innovative culture. And when you have an innovative culture, you're able to build a better world.
Thank you very much. Makofi tafadhali, that's our final. Zaha, your final thoughts.
Of course, I'll be controversial. First of all, there's a Femicide march on the 10th of December. Attend, and for the men, carry your mother, carry your wife, carry your girlfriend, carry your sisters. It's not a gender war, it's a war against you, the violations of human rights. That aside, time doesn't exist. Time is an illusion, only clocks do. What do I mean? That you have a spectrum of growth that can only make sense to you. And the best person to give advice on what is best for you is still you. So approach your orient of what life is in the best version of yourself that you'd want to see, and in the most ideal thought around yourself, because you're the best person that has your back ever and ever, alone. Even if the world subsides, you exist for yourself.
Thank you. You should have told me time doesn't exist. We didn't have to finish this program. But anyways, beautifully good.
What is your narrative of victory? Not success, victory. And what is your narrative of defeat? What is it that you tell yourself in the quiet moments when you are talking to yourself and no one else? The things that you're afraid to face, they are the building blocks of your narrative of defeat. What is your narrative of victory? What is it that you look at? If it's in the past, things that you've achieved, things that you've done against odds, can they form a narrative that propels you on as you mature in life and as you tackle newer and more difficult circumstances? What is your narrative victory?
Thank you.
James, you put me in an unfair position on either side. But
I was trying to save you this time.
yeah, okay. No, it didn't help.
It didn't work.
My take home. Generations don't have to collide. I think there's a space for all of us to evolve with time, to grow, to flow, to ebb, to gel, to understand each other. That's, for me, is lifelong. And as we say, there's an old adage that says, think about quality over what? Quantity.
All right. Makofi tafadhali. No, do you have some wisdom, final philosophical underpinnings that can take us home, please?
I can try. This has been a beautiful conversation. I will definitely say that. Hope finds itself as being at the forefront of our existence and is the thing that pushes us forward, that drives motion. As I've said, to exist is one thing, to live is another, to hope and to create. That is where true power lies. And let us never forget that. Thank you.
Well, ladies and gentlemen, a big round of applause for my panelists, please. Time doesn't exist. Hope, narrative of defeat and failure, quality over quantity, fantastic things. I mean, I could watch this and listen to these guys forever and ever. Benjamin, it's for you now to really take us home or debase this conversation because we left it a high.
There we go. Thank you. Guys, first of all, let's get a big clap to James Smart. Yes. So just to give you a bit of background about how we organize these things is we never really know what we're going to talk about. There's no script. And the moderator normally just ambushed a month before and told, you will show up and we will have a conversation. And that's the beauty of the public lecture series is there is no script. And the idea is that we have open, genuine conversations like we've had today. Today, but I'm very philosophical. I don't know that things. But I think a big thank you to the panelists, of course, for coming today, for you, again, for coming today. But I also want to thank the team that's behind the scenes there, the production team. a lot of work goes into making these productions every quarter, and I don't think we appreciate them as much. Yes. We have a whole committee that comes up with this, and yes, it's always a bit of stress. And so when we have a successful production like today, we really appreciate. And we welcome you to come. We are every quarter, so the next one should be somewhere. Yes, right? Yeah. So next year, I think somewhere should be February. So the next one will be in February, but if you go on the website, you'll be able to get the date. And please, we welcome you to come. As I said, the topic is chosen just a month before, based on what's happening. So when for the guy who was against social media, we look there. We normally check there to see what the pulse of the society is, figure out what topic you're going to talk. So for those who are on online social media, please keep up with the conversation. And I say the conversation doesn't end today. This is just us starting the conversation. And I'm sure it's a conversation you'll be able to take with you wherever you are. So from the university side and the hospital side, I appreciate everyone. And so we're gonna do, I know everyone has been given a gift, but what I want is people to exchange their gifts. So the two of you will exchange your gifts, two of you exchange your gifts, so that we bring the generations together so that, oh, sorry, people have put things already.
Oh.
Yes, so you exchange the gift that you were given. Yes, so as you can cross the generational divides. Yes, cross the generational divides. All right, thank you, everyone. There's food and snacks downstairs. So please grab something on your way home, and we'll see you in February. Happy holidays. Cheers.
Thank you. Thank you. Amazing.